In the next panel that I sent you on the billboard in the background, there's a Japanese Defense Force billboard. Was that translated? Because that has art behind it. So when you originally in the Japanese version, is that in English or did you have to go back and change that?
I had to go back and change it. And even more, that was actually that sign originally didn't have 80 text on it in the initial release version. Like even in Japanese, and so we sort of got like an updated version of that page. It was like, hey, we got to go back and add this sign. It was like, okay, all right. Yeah. So that has happened a couple of times where we've had to go, like, we get sort of just like, hey, the author changed this, so we have to go back and update it. And so I would say that, like, especially for manga simulpubs, there's a lot of like knowing where to pick your battles. So I would sort of like to think of it like, what are the text aspects that are crucial to understanding the story? Because you'll notice that there are some bits that are just like subtitled, but they'll just have a little note to it, like there's like a bottle that Kafka drinks in the first chapter that it's like, well, we don't really need, like, it's nice that the reader can read it, but it's not like it doesn't need to be replaced for that full immersive experience. I don't know if that's something I'm going to have to replace for the volume version.
Is it usually a lot that you're having to go back and change for the volume?
It's sort of like, it's a back and forth, like. It's sort of like, how'd I put it? I mean, I'm basically just sort of implementing all of the changes that like the editorial folks want. So whether or not that's a lot or a little, of course, with like Shonen Jump graphic novels and stuff for Viz Media, that usually it sort of becomes the implication of like, hey, you're gonna go back and do all the sound effects in English this time, and the amount of extra stuff on top of that really depends.
Have you wanted to do like a manga and then you saw someone else got it done and you read it and you're like, oh, I can't believe they put sound effects there?
Salty.
I would like to think every letterer and really just every sort of professional in general, I bet translators and editors and folks do this all the time, where it's like, this is a part of our brain that we can't shut off. I'm always critiquing or maybe critiquing is not the right word, but I'm looking at the choices that are getting made, and I'll sometimes go like, oh yeah, I agree with that, or being like, I don't know if I would have done that, but I'm like, hey, that's valid, maybe not what I would have done, but I respect it. And that's basically, it's just a constant whenever I'm reading manga in English.
I mean, that's
and I'm sure people do the same I know people do the same for the stuff I work on, where I've gotten comments from my fellow letterers are just like, I wouldn't have made that decision, and I'm like, yeah, that's too bad.
That's too bad. I'm doing it though, so sorry.
yeah, exactly. It's just sort of like, hey, you know what? That's just how it is. I think it's really it's sort of fun in a way of just like sort of breaking down what decisions are being made when it comes to the visual identity of a manga, and being like, hey, that's something I really like, and hey, maybe that's something I don't. Oftentimes, I will see a letterer use a particular font in a particular way, and then I'll just go like, well, I'm going to go buy that now.
Right? Yeah.
I like to think that we're all sort of learning from each other. We're all sort of like pushing each other. At least with the letterers that I'm friends with. I'm not like, oh, I'm connected all across the industry or anything like that. But I think that's another benefit of being really open about the choices that you're making, and really being like, hey, this is how I did this way. Maybe this can help you whenever you come across this. And definitely, I would say I'm a product of the folks that I'm friends with.
Yeah, for sure. We read a series called Saint Young Men, right? It's about Buddha and Jesus living together as roommates. Very funny, very cool. But as we were reading it, one of the things that we talked about in the episode was the translation. It's comedy, it's humor, and for humor to land, I think a lot of the time it's very dependent on, sometimes in that series specifically, your cultural knowledge and your ability to sort of like read what's on a shirt or what's on a billboard or something. And so the way they decided to structure it was by putting all the translation notes at the end of each chapter. And I was telling Cody that, like, for me, if I maybe had them before or if I had them on the page, it might have helped the joke, because in that moment I didn't get it and I had to wait till the end of the chapter. So how do you, like, personal preference, how do you feel about like handling that?
Humor is really difficult. And honestly, that's sort of one of those things like where you get to place the notes and stuff like that. That's, I would go out on a limb and say that's probably not a choice that the letterer made.
Sure.
But Yeah, it is definitely one of those sorts of things where those I think context is really important, where if there is a joke, then maybe you want to like massage the text in a way that it is immediately understood, but you also don't want to like you don't want notes all over the page.
Yeah.
Because it'll be distracting. So it's sort of like every sort of outcome has their own pros and cons. Or like, hey, maybe you could replace all the text elements, but it would take forever, and that's just sort of not reasonable within like the time that you have. So it's just sort of like you really have to work within the constraints you're given sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, there's oftentimes no answer that is 100% perfect.
This is hard-hitting question. This is what people want to hear.
Here we go.
Who is your favorite character in Kaiju number 8 so far? So far. I know there's a lot of good ones.
Everybody's so
Everyone's
good. I didn't think it
good.
would turn out this way. I did not expect to like this character as much as I do. I think it's Hoshina. I think Hoshina is my favorite
Oh,
character.
okay.
I didn't even think he was going to stick around. I thought he was just like, oh, he's the character who laughs at Kafka during the test, and it's just like, oh, he's actually sick though.
He is. He is.
Yeah.
He totally is.
I think it is. It might be the element of surprise that it's been sort of like I didn't expect anything, or that this character would even stick around, and then he's just sort of like, oh, he's amazing. So
yeah, there's so
every
character in that series is so awesome, man. I mean, it's just so connecting with older protagonist, no big deal. And everybody from like Reno, everybody. It's just so fun to read and I mean, it's got to be so much fun every week. I mean, you get a 1 week you get it 1 week early, right? That's got to be kind of nice, right?
These last few chapters have been really rough. So just sort of like, all right, I finished it, and then I just got to sit. I mean, not the upcoming one. I'm referring to like chapter 31, 32, when at the end of the big battle, when Kafka finally transforms in front of everybody. And knowing that for a week or two ahead of time, I was just sort of like,
yeah, it's got to be so hard to not. I mean, obviously you're not going to spoil anything, but just sitting on it, it's just like, it's got to be hard.
I'm glad I have David to talk to about these chapters, because it's just like I need somebody to just like
Yeah. And do you ever wish like things that you really like if, for instance, like Kaiju number 8, like you wish that you could just read it as a consumer versus actually you're like, oh, I wish I could have just seen this without having to do it 5 times and knowing the line in your brain and in the memory. Like,
because obviously I'm in a really unique spot where I get to sort of watch the story play out in slow motion. Because I'm sitting here like, pasting text line by line, and I'm just like, oh, okay, this is what's happening. And then I really have to focus in on the text panel by panel, word balloon by word balloon. So I'm sort of just like, I'm just soaking in the story, and it just feels, when I get really invested in one that I'm working on like that, it's just like, it is so fun.
So
it is great.
Have you been in the middle of lettering something and then you like realize that a huge plot twist, and then you're like, damn. Like as you're doing
depending on the series, I guess I'll like for some stuff, especially stuff that's really wordy, and maybe I'm sort of like, I'm enjoying it, but I'm not like super into it. I'll sort of like, I start to zone out with the dialogue, and I start to see it as like the text shapes, basically. Like I'm not reading it. I'm looking at how the words should be arranged in the most like appealing way possible, and I'm just sort of like I'm just turning my brain off and going through it, basically. And then sometimes I'll turn the page and be like, wait, hold on, something really important just happened.
Brandon, we don't want to keep you for too much longer, but I do want to know if somebody watching, listening, maybe someone that you're talking to right now, ever with very proficient in Photoshop, if someone wanted to like get into sort of what you do, how did you get into it, or what are some of the steps that people can take to do lettering? Because I'm sure a lot of people want to know, maybe this guy.
I would say don't worry so much about lettering experience specifically. What a lot of publishers are looking for is just sort of like general graphic design know-how, like taste, for lack of a better word, of just like knowing how to make text look good, what looks good, what makes text appealing to read, and just sort of like basic software know-how. Like I use primarily Photoshop and InDesign day to day, but I really I didn't know that much about InDesign starting out. I sort of fumbled around and was like I figured it out as I went along, basically. But it definitely was my stronger Photoshop skills that carried me. But as for actually like, if you have those skills, actually getting work is the really hard part, because you basically have to. There's a lot of timing that goes into it, and a lot of just like putting yourself out there, making yourself known that this is what you want to do.
Right.
I've met folks who, they approached me as somebody who wanted to get into lettering, and then maybe they become more involved. We follow each other on Twitter. They follow a bunch of letterers on Twitter, and we're all like sort of exchanging advice. And I've seen people go from fan to pro in that way.
Wow.
It just sort of takes like, you have to let people know what it is that you want to do, and you have to keep doing that and hoping that you can come across like people will, give like, if they're too busy for something, maybe they'll forward an opportunity to you. Like, hey, I know a guy who's just waiting to get started. And then, like that, it's really just like that first getting your foot in the door. That's the hard part.
Yeah, and I'm sure having connections too is helpful.
Yeah, basically. I basically work for 7 manga publishers at this point.
Wow.
Probably most of the manga industry at this point.
Hey, now humble brag.
Humble brag. But only one of them, 7 Seas, was the only one that I got in through like a cold call, and the rest was just sort of like I got into Viz after like my first 7 Seas book. I was like, I've lettered literally 1 manga. Please hire me. And then it worked weirdly. So it's just, everybody has their different weird path through this sort of thing. So it's hard for really be like, do this, and this, and you'll be guaranteed a job freelancing in the manga industry. And I think freelance is the important part, because this work is all freelance. So it is a lot of just like, folks are looking for somebody who can do the job and are easy to work with.
Right. Yeah, I think I heard like a Neil Gaiman interview where he was talking about writing, and he said basically like, out of the 3 things, you're punctual, you're easy to work with, and there's like one more, I forget. He's like, but you only have to be 2 out of the 3.
You're a baller. Baller's number 3.
Baller's number 3.
So is it punctual, easy to work with? If I had a third one, I would say speed.
Oh, important.
Yeah. Especially with that turnaround.
Yeah. And even noticing it now, just in anime in general, like the spike of how many shows they're doing per season and how many mangas are coming out. Like the demand is insane, especially now that it's just becoming way more popular here in the States. It's like,
pretty much.
It's so crazy to see how much has changed in the past, 9-10 years.
Yeah. It's honestly, I think I got into manga at the right time, because I was, I started working professionally in 2017. So that was sort of in the midst of the boom.
Totally.
Like My Hero Academia had been out, Attack on Titan had been out, and so it was just sort of building momentum. And there's just been so much more manga coming out.
Yeah.
That I really just like, I guess I got my foot in at a point where I basically have stuff to do all the time, because every publisher is just like, we have 500 million books for you to do. I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
Well, Brandon, before you get out of here, we would be remiss if we didn't ask you, Cody.
Alrighty.
I'm trying on some big words, Brandon. Please don't judge me, dude. Thank you so much. We need to ask you top maybe 3. I know it's a lot of pressure, but what are some of currently like your absolute favorite manga series that are out right now?
To work on, or just to read for pleasure?
I mean, if you got time for both.